Apparently, finding your husband's secret life through a resort booking confirmation isn't what they mean by expanding your social network. Who knew? It was a Monday morning, October 14th, 2024, the kind that usually promised nothing more exciting than lukewarm Starbucks coffee and an inbox overflowing with emails about synergy and leveraging assets. But for Harper Hayes, a woman who prided herself on her meticulously organized life, from her color-coded pantry in Scottsdale to her perfectly curated LinkedIn profile, this particular Monday was about to deliver a notification far more jarring than any corporate memo. It started innocently enough. I was scrolling through my personal email, deleting spam from discount mattress stores and unsolicited invites to multi-level marketing schemes, when a subject line caught my eye. Your upcoming stay at the Azure Palms Resort. My brow furrowed. Landon, my husband of 12 years, the man who considered a spontaneous trip to Home Depot an adventure, had mentioned a work conference in Phoenix. He'd said it was at some bland downtown Marriott, probably with beige carpets and questionable continental breakfast. Not the Azure Palms Resort, a 5-star coastal paradise known for its infinity pools, couples massages, and exorbitant rates. And certainly not one that screamed rigorous professional development. My first thought was a glitch, a spam email gone rogue. My second, a cold dread, sharp and unwelcome, began to coil in my stomach, tighter than a yoga mom's ponytail. I clicked on the email, my fingers trembling ever so slightly, a feeling I usually reserved for hitting send on a major client proposal. The reservation details popped up, clear as day, mocking me with their pristine formatting. A 2-night stay, Friday to Sunday, for Landon Hayes and guest. And the guest's name? Sloan. Just Sloan. No last name needed, apparently. Like Cher or Madonna, but with less talent and probably more questionable life choices. Sloan. I didn't even need to scroll to know who Sloan was. Sloan, the new contact Landon had networked with at some industry mixer a few months back. The one he'd mentioned once or twice, vaguely, as someone who might be good for future collaborations. The one whose Instagram profile, which I'd casually stumbled upon, was a curated collection of sun-kissed selfies, perfectly plated avocado toast, and motivational quotes about manifesting abundance. Sloan, who I had dismissed as a harmless if slightly annoying social media butterfly. Oh, how wrong I had been. Landon, my predictable, spreadsheet-loving Landon, was having an affair. And not just any affair, but one so cliché, so utterly unoriginal. It felt like a bad rom-com script rejected by Lifetime for being too on the nose. A work trip to a luxury resort with a young, bubbly, Insta-famous contact? The man couldn't even pick a decent lie. He was a walking, talking stereotype, a human equivalent of a pre-packaged suburban fantasy. And frankly, it was insulting. My first instinct wasn't to scream or cry, or even throw my lukewarm coffee mug at the pristine white wall of my home office. It was a strange, almost detached amusement. A dark, cynical laugh bubbled up from deep inside my chest. Landon, my meticulously boring, predictably unadventurous Landon, was trying to be Don Draper. He was trying to have a secret life, a clandestine weekend of illicit romance. He thought he was pulling a fast one on his unsuspecting wife, Harper Hayes, marketing director extraordinaire, who could spot a weak narrative from a mile away. Oh, honey. He had no idea he was about to become the unwitting star of Harper's very own, very public, very humiliating reality show. Because if there was one thing Harper knew how to do, it was to turn a personal tragedy into an unforgettable spectacle. And Landon was about to get a front-row seat to his own downfall, complete with popcorn and a side of schadenfreude. I leaned back in my ergonomic office chair, the expensive leather creaking softly, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across my face. My mind, usually buzzing with marketing strategies for my tech startup and project deadlines, now shifted gears, moving at lightning speed. This wasn't just about catching him. It was about orchestrating a symphony of awkwardness, a ballet of public shame so exquisitely choreographed, it would make a Broadway show look like a middle school talent night. I wasn't going to confront him quietly. like some tearful housewife in a bad 80s movie. Oh no. Harper Hayes believed in grand gestures. And what grander gesture than a bouquet of flowers? A magnificent, undeniable, utterly devastating bouquet. Signed, of course, by your wife. The thought sent a delicious shiver down my spine, a thrill more potent than closing $1 million deal. I reached for my phone, my fingers flying across the screen, already formulating the group chat message. There were only 2 people in the world who could truly appreciate the dark brilliance of my plan and who would help me execute it with surgical precision. Britt and Keely. Britt, my oldest friend since our college days at ASU, a master strategist of social dynamics, a connoisseur of juicy gossip, and someone who could plan a surprise party that would make the Secret Service jealous. Keely, my tech-savvy confidant, a cybersecurity analyst who could dig up dirt on anyone, anywhere, with just a few clicks, making the NSA look like amateurs. Together, they were a force of nature, a triumvirate of chaos, and Landon was about to feel their collective wrath. "Girls," I texted, my thumbs blurring across the keyboard, "cancel your weekend plans. Operation Landon's Last Stand is officially a go. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss this. This is going to be a hot mess in the best possible way." I hit send, a feeling of exhilarating anticipation bubbling up inside me, like a perfectly carbonated craft beer. Landon might have thought he was escaping for a romantic weekend, a little tryst under the Arizona sun. But he was actually walking straight into a trap crafted with precision, fueled by righteous indignation, and delivered with a side of perfectly timed, acid-laced humor. The game was on, and Landon had no idea he was already losing. The countdown to his public unraveling had begun. The next few days were a blur of hushed phone calls, clandestine coffee meetings at our local Starbucks, and an almost unbearable tension that I artfully concealed behind a facade of serene domesticity. Landon, bless his oblivious heart, was practically radiating smug satisfaction. He'd hum off key tunes while getting ready for work, offer me perfunctory pecks on the cheek, the kind you give a distant aunt, and talk endlessly about the rigorous agenda of his upcoming work trip to Phoenix. He even mentioned a keynote speaker he was really looking forward to hearing. I just nodded, smiled sweetly, and mentally tallied the number of designer outfits Sloane would likely pack for her illicit getaway. The irony was so thick you could spread it on a bagel with a butter knife. "He's acting like he just won the Powerball," Britt observed during one of our planning sessions, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the chase. We were huddled in my kitchen, a map of the Azure Palms Resort spread across the granite countertop, surrounded by empty Diet Coke cans. "The man is practically glowing. It's disgusting." "It's the glow of impending doom, darling," I corrected, tracing a finger along the resort's sprawling pool area. "He just doesn't know it yet." Britt, ever the practical strategist, had already mapped out the entire resort layout. "Okay, so the Azure Palms has a killer pool bar, the Oasis, and the main restaurant, the Coral Reef, is right off the lobby," she explained, gesturing wildly with a half-eaten everything bagel. "We'll need a strategic vantage point, somewhere we can observe without being observed. Think Ocean's 11, but with more martinis, less actual larceny, and significantly higher stakes for Landon." Keely, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of digital espionage, cross-referencing Landon's work conference schedule with Sloane's social media posts. "She's already posted a cryptic vacation mode activated selfie," Keely reported, her fingers flying across her tablet, looking like a digital ninja. "No location tagged, but the background looks suspiciously like the resort's lobby art. And her caption? Ready for some much-needed R&R with my favorite person. Amateur. This girl needs a social media manager stat." My role was to maintain the illusion of blissful ignorance. I'd ask Landon mundane questions about his packing. "Did you remember your swim trunks, honey? The ones with the little flamingos?" Offer to iron his shirts, and even packed him a small bag of his favorite trail mix for the long flight to Phoenix, which was, let's be real, a 45-minute drive. Each act of supposed wifely devotion was a tiny internal victory, a silent promise of the storm to come. "Don't forget your toothbrush, honey," I'd chirped, handing him a travel-sized one I'd bought specifically for him, knowing he'd forget his own. He looked at me, surprised, a flicker of something almost resembling gratitude in his eyes. "Oh, thanks, Harper. You're the best." The best. Oh, he had no idea. I was the best at making sure his little weekend getaway became a cautionary tale for the ages, a legend whispered in suburban cul-de-sacs for years to come. Friday came, and Landon, briefcase in hand, kissed me goodbye with an air of barely contained excitement. "Big weekend, babe," he said, already halfway out the door. "Lots of networking. Don't miss me too much." I blew him a kiss, a perfectly executed performance of the doting wife. "Have fun, honey. Don't work too hard." The door clicked shut, and I let out a slow, triumphant exhale. The first act was complete. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect day for a public spectacle in sunny Scottsdale. I, Britt, and Keely arrived at the Azure Palms Resort, looking like three perfectly innocent friends on a girls' trip. I wore oversized sunglasses that hid the mischievous glint in my eyes, and a wide-brimmed straw hat that screamed, "I'm here to relax, not to ruin lives." We checked into our own discreetly booked suite, a few floors below Landon and Sloane's, ensuring we had a prime view of the pool area and the main walkways. "All right, ladies," Britt announced, pulling out a pair of high-powered binoculars from her oversized Tory Burch tote bag. "Operation Poolside Peril is a go. Let the games begin." From our balcony, we had a perfect vantage point of the resort's sprawling pool deck, a sea of lounge chairs and cabanas. It didn't take long to spot them. Landon, looking ridiculously pleased with himself in a pair of too tight swim trunks, the ones with the little flamingos naturally, was lounging on a sunbed, attempting to read a business journal. Sloane, in a barely there bikini that left little to the imagination, giggled at something he said, then playfully splashed him. They were holding hands, whispering secrets, completely oblivious to the three pairs of eyes watching their every move like a surveillance team from a bad spy movie. "Oh, look at them," Keely muttered, adjusting her designer sunglasses, a look of mild disgust on her face. "So in love. It's almost vomit-inducing. He looks like a middle-aged man trying to relive his college spring break." "Almost," I agreed, taking a long, slow sip of my mimosa. "But also, deeply satisfying. He thinks he's getting away with something. He thinks he's invisible, just another face in the crowd at a resort. He's about to learn that in this resort, there are no secrets, especially not from his wife." We spent the day observing, making sarcastic comments, and occasionally sending each other knowing glances that spoke volumes. Landon, in his desperate attempt to appear youthful and carefree for Sloane, even tried to play beach volleyball, resulting in an embarrassing faceplant into the sand that had Britt and Keely stifling their laughter behind their large sunglasses. "He's trying too hard," Britt whispered, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. "It's tragic, really. He looks like a train wreck." As the afternoon wore on, I felt a strange mix of emotions. The initial sting of betrayal had dulled, replaced by a growing sense of empowerment. This wasn't just about getting even. It was about reclaiming my narrative, turning my pain into a punchline. I watched Landon, so caught up in his pathetic fantasy, and realized how small he truly was. He was a man chasing a fleeting illusion, a desperate attempt to recapture lost youth, while I was about to orchestrate a moment that would define him, not just for me, but for everyone around him. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the resort, I made my final preparation. The stage was set, the actors were in place, and the main event was just hours away. Landon had no idea his private little rom-com was about to turn into a very public, very humiliating documentary. As dusk settled over the azure palms, a palpable hum of anticipation filled my suite. The air crackled with a mix of pre-show jitters and the intoxicating scent of expensive perfume. I stood before the full-length mirror, smoothing the emerald green silk of my gown. It shimmered under the soft lighting, clinging in all the right places, a silent testament to my unwavering resolve. Landon had always loved this dress, saying it made my eyes sparkle like the Arizona night sky, a fact that now added a delicious, almost poetic layer of irony to my ensemble. Tonight, I wasn't dressing for him. I was dressing for myself, for my freedom, and for the sheer, unadulterated joy of watching his carefully constructed world implode. Britt, ever the practical strategist, was meticulously reviewing the layout of the Coral Reef, the resort's upscale bar and restaurant. Okay, so our table is here. She pointed on a digital map on her tablet, zooming in with surgical precision, right by the window, with a clear line of sight to the entrance and, more importantly, to the bar area where they'll likely sit. It's a prime viewing spot, darling, like front row seats to a very exclusive, very public dumpster fire. Keely, meanwhile, was making a final check on the bouquet delivery details. Confirmed, she announced, her voice a low purr, like a well-oiled machine. Magnificent red roses, 24, delivered precisely at 8:30 p.m. And the card, to Landon, with all my love, your wife. No room for error, no room for denial. It's going to hit him like a bus on the 101. The beauty of this plan, I realized, wasn't just the public humiliation. It was the psychological warfare. Landon, the man who prided himself on his discretion and professionalism, who always had to maintain a pristine image, was about to have his entire carefully constructed facade crumble with a single, perfectly timed delivery. He wouldn't be able to talk his way out of this. Sloane wouldn't be able to ignore it. It was a perfectly designed marketing campaign for disaster, and Landon was the unwitting product, about to be launched into a spectacular failure. You know, Britt mused, swirling a glass of sparkling water, this is so much more satisfying than just screaming at him. This is art. The art of the slow burn, the strategic strike. It's like a masterclass in passive-aggressive revenge, but with actual aggression. Exactly, I agreed, my eyes glinting with a dangerous light. Screaming is for amateurs. I'm a professional. I believe in precision. And besides, I added, a wry smile playing on my lips, I wanted to make sure he remembered this weekend. Not just for the romantic getaway, but for the experience. He's always been so good at forgetting the inconvenient truths. I knew Landon. He was a creature of habit, a man who hated confrontation and who valued his reputation above all else, especially within his social circles in Scottsdale. This wasn't just about exposing his infidelity. It was about exposing his pathetic, cowardly nature to the one person he was trying to impress, Sloane, and everyone else in that high-end establishment. We made our way down to the Coral Reef, a picture of sophisticated elegance. I felt like I was walking onto a stage, every step deliberate, every breath controlled. The bar was already buzzing, filled with the low murmur of conversations, the clinking of expensive glasses, and the soft jazz music that usually soothed, but tonight felt like a dramatic soundtrack building to a crescendo. We were seated at our prearranged table, perfectly positioned to observe the unfolding drama. I ordered a dry martini, extra olives, my hands steady, my heart thrumming with a mixture of nerves and exhilarating anticipation. Minutes later, the entrance doors swung open, and there they were. Landon, looking awkwardly dapper in a blazer that was slightly too tight across his shoulders, and Sloane, radiant in a little black dress, clinging to his arm. They walked in hand, a picture of illicit romance, completely oblivious to the three pairs of eyes watching their every move. I felt a surge of something akin to pity for Sloane, quickly followed by a wave of triumphant satisfaction. They chose a table near the bar, settling in, their heads close together, whispering and giggling like teenagers at a high school dance. Look at them, Keely whispered, a smirk playing on her lips. So cozy. They have no idea what's coming. It's giving Last Supper vibes. Oh, they're about to, I murmured, taking a slow sip of my martini, savoring the burn. They're about to get a very rude awakening. A period moment, if you will. The wait was agonizing, yet thrilling. I kept my gaze casual, occasionally glancing at Landon and Sloane, who were now engrossed in their menus, occasionally exchanging conspiratorial smiles. The bar music, usually a soothing background hum, now felt like a dramatic soundtrack, building to a crescendo. Every time a waiter passed their table, my heart gave a little jump. This was it, the moment of truth. The moment Landon's carefully constructed fantasy would shatter into a million tiny, humiliating pieces. I could almost taste the fear that would soon grip him, the public humiliation that would wash over him. And I, Harper Hayes, was there to savor every single glorious second of it. The curtain was about to rise, and Landon had no idea he was the star of my very own, very public, very viral reality show. The show where the plot twist was me. The clinking of glasses and the low hum of conversation in the Coral Reef bar suddenly seemed to fade into a distant echo, replaced by the amplified beat of my own heart. I watched, my breath held, as a waiter approached Landon and Sloane's table. In his hands, he carried a magnificent bouquet of 24 long-stemmed red roses, so vibrant they seemed to glow in the dim, sophisticated lighting of the bar. It was precisely 8:30 p.m. Perfect. My timing, as always, was impeccable. Landon and Sloane, mid-conversation about what I could only assume was their future, or perhaps the best way to expense a luxury resort stay, looked up, a flicker of surprise on their faces. The waiter, with a polite, almost theatrical smile, presented the bouquet directly to Sloane. "For Landon," he announced, his voice clear and resonant, with a card. Sloane, clearly delighted and perhaps a little confused as to why she was receiving flowers meant for Landon, took the bouquet, her eyes wide with a mixture of pleasure and curiosity. Landon, meanwhile, looked utterly bewildered. He glanced at Sloane, then at the roses, a faint frown creasing his brow, as if trying to solve a particularly complex equation. Sloane, with a giddy smile that quickly morphed into something else entirely, pulled the small card from the bouquet, her fingers fumbling slightly. She brought it closer, her lips moving as she read the inscription aloud, her voice carrying just enough to be heard in the sudden, eerie silence that had fallen over their immediate vicinity. "To Landon, with all my love," she began, her voice sweet and innocent, then paused, her eyes widening, her smile faltering, the color draining from her face faster than a politician's promises. Her voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible, yet somehow resonating through the hushed bar, like a perfectly aimed dart. "Your wife." The silence that followed was deafening. It stretched, taut and agonizing, for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 3 seconds. Every head in the bar seemed to swivel, every pair of eyes fixed on Landon and Sloane's table. It was like a slow-motion scene from a B-movie, but with real-life consequences. Landon's face, which moments before had been a picture of relaxed contentment, drained of all color. He went from a healthy flush to an alarming shade of ghostly white, like he'd just seen a ghost, or perhaps his entire life flashing before his eyes. Beads of sweat immediately appeared on his forehead, glistening under the soft lights. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, utterly frozen, his eyes darting frantically around the room as if searching for an escape route, a secret tunnel, anything to make him disappear. Sloane, on the other hand, was a study in pure, unadulterated shock. Her eyes, wide as saucers, were fixed on Landon, a slow, dawning horror spreading across her features. The bouquet, still clutched in her hand, seemed to wilt under the weight of the revelation, its vibrant red suddenly looking like a bloody stain. "You're married?" she shrieked, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. It was a raw, visceral sound, filled with betrayal and disbelief, echoing off the high ceilings of the upscale bar. "You told me you were divorced. You told me you were separated. You manipulative, lying." Before Landon could even stammer a response, Sloane, fueled by a sudden surge of righteous fury, grabbed the drink from their table, a vibrant crimson cocktail, ironically matching the roses, and with a swift, decisive motion, flung it directly into Landon's face. The liquid splattered across his pristine blazer, dripping down his ashen cheeks, a vivid stain against his pale skin. He flinched, sputtering, the ice cubes clattering to the table with a pathetic little dance. "I can't believe I fell for your lies," Sloane roared, pushing her chair back with such force that it scraped loudly against the polished floor, a sound that made everyone jump. She stood up, her chest heaving, her eyes blazing with a mixture of rage and profound humiliation. "You are a despicable human being, A total hot mess. With one last disgusted glare at Landon, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the bar, leaving a trail of stunned silence, dripping cocktail, and shattered illusions in her wake. The roses, now abandoned on the table, seemed to mock Landon with their silent beauty. Landon, soaked and utterly mortified, sat slumped in his chair, a pathetic figure of shame. He looked around desperately, his eyes wide with terror, as if hoping the floor would swallow him whole, or perhaps a sinkhole would open up and whisk him away to a parallel dimension where none of this had happened. And that's when his gaze, frantic and searching, landed on my table. I, Britt, and Keely sat there, perfectly poised, each with a triumphant smile playing on our lips. We raised our glasses in a silent toast, the clink of crystal a delicate counterpoint to the chaos that had just erupted. I, with a slow, deliberate motion, lifted my hand and gave Landon a small, almost imperceptible wave, a little bye-bye gesture, filled with a lifetime of unspoken goodbyes, of neglected anniversaries, of countless times I'd been made to feel invisible. Landon's eyes widened even further, if that were possible. His jaw dropped, and any remaining color drained from his face. He looked from me to Britt, then to Keely, then back to the empty chair where Sloane had been, and finally, to the magnificent, now slightly crumpled bouquet of roses on the table. He was finally seeing me. Not the invisible wife, not the woman he took for granted, but the architect of his very public, very well-deserved downfall. He was a man utterly broken, exposed, and humiliated. And I, Harper Hayes, was there to enjoy every single, glorious second of it. This was the moment his carefully constructed facade crumbled, and it was glorious. The aftermath of the coral reef catastrophe, as Britt immediately christened it, was everything I had hoped for, and more. Sloane, true to her word, abandoned Landon there and then. She stormed out of the bar, her head held high despite the public spectacle, leaving Landon to wallow in his self-made misery. He remained seated at the table, a pathetic, sodden mess, the crimson cocktail stain on his pristine blazer a stark badge of his shame. The hushed whispers of the other patrons, their eyes darting between him and the now empty doorway, were a symphony of judgment. A chorus of, "Can you believe that guy?" "Well, that was certainly memorable," Keely commented, taking a leisurely sip of her drink, a satisfied smirk playing on her lips. "I'd say that's a 5-star review for Operation Landon's Last Stand." "Indeed," I agreed, a profound sense of calm washing over me. I looked at Landon, still slumped at the table, a defeated figure, and felt not anger, but a strange, liberating indifference. He was no longer my problem. He was just a man who had made a very public fool of himself, a cautionary tale for anyone contemplating a work trip to a luxury resort with a secret girlfriend. As we sat there, enjoying our victory, a few of the women at nearby tables caught my eye. They offered small, knowing smiles, some even giving me a subtle nod of approval, a silent, "You go, girl." One woman, a sophisticated-looking lady with a knowing glint in her eye, even raised her own glass in a silent toast. It was a moment of unexpected solidarity, a quiet acknowledgement of the universal language of female empowerment, a shared understanding of the sheer audacity of men like Landon. I smiled back, a genuine, unburdened smile. I wasn't just exposing Landon, I was reclaiming my own narrative, my own dignity, and perhaps inspiring a few others to do the same. Landon, unable to bear the weight of the stares and whispers, eventually slunk out of the bar, disappearing into the vast anonymity of the luxury resort. He was gone, vanished, leaving behind only the lingering scent of his shame and the faint aroma of red roses. I later heard from a very chatty hotel staff member that he checked out before dawn, leaving Sloane's belongings behind. Some things apparently aren't worth the baggage fees. Britt, Keely, and I, however, were just getting started. We spent the rest of the weekend in a glorious haze of victory. We ordered room service, indulged in spa treatments, and lounged by the pool, occasionally spotting Landon's forlorn figure lurking in the shadows, avoiding eye contact, looking like a lost puppy who'd just been told he couldn't have any more treats. He was a ghost in his own romantic getaway, a specter of his former, arrogant self. We laughed. We shared stories. And we toasted to new beginnings, to female friendship, and to the sweet taste of justice. You know, I mused, as we watched the sun set over the ocean on Sunday evening, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, a perfect Arizona sunset. For so long, I thought my happiness was tied to him, to our life, our routine, the illusion of perfection in our suburban house. I thought that was the American dream. I took a deep breath, the salty air filling my lungs, a feeling of lightness I hadn't felt in years. But watching him today, seeing him so utterly exposed, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about realizing that I was free, free from the lies, free from the pretense, free to be myself again, free from the constant gaslighting. Britt nodded, her arm around my shoulder. That's the real victory, Harper. Not just making him pay, but realizing you don't need him to be happy. You're the main character in your own story, and he was just a very minor, very forgettable villain. A plot device, really? Keeley, always the pragmatist, chimed in, and a very badly dressed one at that. Those flamingo swim trunks were a crime against humanity. We burst into laughter, the sound echoing across the balcony, light and unburdened. Landon had thought he was embarking on a secret romantic adventure. Instead, he had stumbled into a meticulously planned trap, orchestrated by the very woman he had underestimated. He had lost his lover, his dignity, and quite possibly, his mind. I, on the other hand, had gained something far more valuable: my freedom, my friends, and a truly epic story to tell. The divorce proceedings, I knew, would be messy, probably involving a few awkward encounters at the country club, but I faced them with a newfound strength and an unwavering sense of purpose. I had faced my worst fear, confronted betrayal head-on, and emerged not just intact, but empowered and hilariously triumphant. Landon had wanted a weekend to remember. Harper Hayes had ensured he would never, ever forget it, and neither would anyone else in that bar.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.